Princess Kira of Valdris stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Earth Embassy's reception hall, her violet eyes scanning the bustling cityscape below. The alien world fascinated her, so different from the crystal spires and floating gardens of her home planet. Here, beings of both genders moved freely through the streets, and she found herself curious about their strange customs. "Your Highness, the diplomatic briefing begins in 20 minutes, her aide whispered beside her. Kira nodded, but her attention remained fixed on the scene below. On Valdris, the matriarchal society meant she rarely interacted with males as equals. They served, they provided, they worshipped, but they never challenged her intellectually or treated her as anything but a precious figurehead to be protected and pampered. She turned from the window, her flowing cerulean gown rustling against the polished floor. The fabric, woven from silken threads that shifted color with her movements, marked her as royalty even among the diverse alien dignitaries gathered for the Interplanetary Peace Summit. "Actually," Kira said, a mischievous smile playing at her lips, "I think I'll explore a bit more first. These humans intrigue me." Her aide's eyes widened in alarm. "Princess, that would be most irregular." "Irregular can be refreshing," Kira interrupted, already moving toward the mingling crowd. She glided through the reception, observing the strange human customs. Men and women spoke as equals, their conversations flowing with mutual respect rather than the deference she was accustomed to. It was liberating, in a way she couldn't quite understand. Near the refreshment table, she noticed a man standing, slightly apart from the crowd. Unlike the boisterous diplomats and politicians, he seemed content to observe, occasionally jotting notes in a small journal. His dark hair was slightly tousled, and when he looked up from his writing, she caught sight of warm brown eyes that held intelligence and quiet confidence. Intrigued, Kira approached him. "You're not networking like the others," she observed. He looked up, startled by her presence, and she saw his breath catch slightly as he took in her ethereal beauty. "I'm more of an observer," he said, recovering quickly. "David Chen. I'm with the archaeological expedition that discovered the Valdris artifacts last year." "Ah." Kira's eyes lit up with genuine interest. "You're the one who found the Temple of First Memory." "I'm Princess Kira," David finished, a slight smile tugging at his lips. "Your reputation precedes you, though I have to say the artifacts didn't capture your presence." There was something in his tone, appreciative but not worshipful, interested but not desperate. It was refreshingly different from the cowering males of her homeworld. "You study my people's history," she said, moving closer. "What have you learned about us?" "That Valdris civilization is remarkable," David replied, his confidence growing as he spoke about his passion. "The artistic achievements, the technological advances, the complex social structures, it's fascinating, though I'll admit some of your customs are difficult for humans to understand." Kira raised an eyebrow. "Such as?" "The rigid gender roles, for one. The expectation that males exist solely to serve females." He paused, studying her face. "I hope that doesn't offend you." Instead of offense, Kira felt a thrill of excitement. No one had ever dared question her, society's ways so directly. "On the contrary, I find your perspective refreshing." They talked for another hour, their conversation flowing from archaeology to philosophy to art. David treated her not as a princess to be coddled, but as an intellectual equal. He challenged her ideas, shared his own, and listened to her responses, with genuine interest. When the reception began winding down, Kira found herself reluctant to end their interaction. An idea formed in her mind, bold and unprecedented for a Valdris princess. "David," she said, placing a delicate hand on his arm, "I'm curious about human courtship customs. Would you take me to dinner tomorrow evening?" David's eyes widened slightly at her directness, but he smiled. "I'd be honored, Princess." "Just Kira," she corrected, "and I'll choose the restaurant, somewhere authentically human." As she glided away, Kira felt a flutter of anticipation in her chest. Tomorrow night she would experience human courtship firsthand. She had no idea that this simple dinner invitation would challenge everything she believed about love, respect, and what it meant to be treated as an equal. The stage was set for a collision of worlds and hearts. The restaurant Kira had chosen was one of the city's finest. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over intimate tables draped in white linen, and soft music created an atmosphere of refined elegance. She arrived precisely on time, wearing a stunning dress that seemed to capture starlight in its fabric, drawing admiring glances from other diners. David was already waiting, looking handsome in a well-tailored dark suit. When he stood to greet her, Kira noticed how his eyes lit up with genuine appreciation, not the vacant worship she was used to, but something deeper and more substantial. "You look breathtaking," he said, pulling out her chair. "Thank you," Kira replied, settling gracefully into her seat. The gesture surprised her. On Valdris, males would prostrate themselves before seating her on a throne-like chair elevated above them. David's courtesy was respectful but equal, treating her as a woman rather than a goddess. As they perused the menu, Kira found herself studying David's face. His features were strong but gentle, and when he concentrated on reading, a small crease appeared between his brows that she found oddly endearing. "The wine selection here is impressive," David commented. "Though I'm curious, what do you drink on Valdris?" "Moonberry nectar usually," Kira replied. "It's extracted from fruits that only bloom under our 3 moons. The process is quite complex. Males spend weeks preparing it, filtering it through precious stones to achieve the perfect clarity." David nodded thoughtfully. "Sounds beautiful. Here we tend to make wine together, men and women working side by side in the vineyards and cellars." The concept intrigued Kira. Together, as equals? Absolutely. Some of our finest vintners are women, some are men. It's about skill and passion, not gender. Throughout dinner, their conversation flowed like the wine they shared. David spoke passionately about his archaeological discoveries, his theories about ancient civilizations, his dreams of uncovering humanity's forgotten past. Kira found herself sharing stories of Valdris that she'd never told anyone. Not the formal histories recited at court, but her personal observations, her secret thoughts about her world's traditions. "You know," David said, leaning forward slightly, "you're not what I expected from a princess." "Oh? What did you expect? Someone more distant, I suppose, untouchable. But you're incredibly thoughtful, curious about everything. You ask questions that make me think differently about things I thought I understood." Warmth spread through Kira's chest at his words. On Valdris, her intelligence was acknowledged, but never truly engaged. Males agreed with everything she said, never challenging her thoughts or building upon her ideas. David's respect for her mind was intoxicating. "And you," she said softly, "treat me like a person instead of a precious object to be worshipped from afar." Their eyes met across the table, and Kira felt something she'd never experienced before, a flutter of attraction based not on power dynamics or predetermined roles, but on genuine connection and mutual respect. The meal continued with shared appetizers and intimate conversation. David told her about growing up on Earth, about his passion for discovering lost civilizations, about his belief that understanding the past could help build a better future. Kira spoke of her duties as princess, her sometimes overwhelming responsibilities, and her secret longing for something more than ceremonial existence. "I've always wondered what it would be like to choose my own path," she admitted, surprising herself with the confession. "Why can't you?" David asked gently. "On Valdris, a princess's life is predetermined. Marriage to a suitable consort who will serve and provide children to continue the royal line. Ceremonies and duties. It's all mapped out." "That sounds lonely." Kira's breath caught. No one had ever acknowledged that her privileged life might also be isolating. "It is sometimes." David reached across the table, covering her hand with his. The simple touch sent electricity through her entire being. His skin was warm and slightly rough from his outdoor work, so different from the soft, pampered hands of Valdris males. "You don't have to be lonely," he said quietly. "Not tonight, anyway." The tenderness in his voice made her heart race. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what it might be like to be with someone who saw her as a partner rather than a goddess to serve. Their dessert arrived, a decadent chocolate creation that they shared, taking turns feeding each other, small bites. The intimacy of the gesture, the way David's eyes never left hers, the soft brush of his fingers against her lips, it all contributed to a growing desire that was entirely new to her. When the server brought the check, Kira sat back, contentedly expecting David to handle the payment as was proper. On Valdris, the very suggestion that a female might pay for anything was unthinkable. It would be a grave insult to the male's ability to provide. David glanced at the bill, then looked up at her with a casual smile. "Shall we split this?" "Theos," words hit Kira like a physical blow. Split the bill? The implication was staggering, that she, a princess, should pay for her own meal like a common servant. Her face flushed with humiliation and anger. "I beg your pardon?" she said, her voice dangerously quiet. David, oblivious to her distress, reached for his wallet. "The bill, we can each pay our half. It's pretty standard on Earth." Kira stared at him in disbelief. All evening she had been charmed by his treatment of her as an equal, but this crossed every line of propriety she knew. To suggest that she pay for her own food was to declare her worthless, unable to attract a mate capable of providing for her. "How dare you?" she whispered, her violet eyes flashing with fury. David looked up, confused by her sudden change in demeanor. "Kira, what's wrong?" "What's wrong?" she repeated, her voice rising. "You invite me to dinner and then humiliate me by suggesting I pay for my own meal? What kind of male are you?" I don't understand. I thought we were having a nice time." Nice time?" Kira stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Other diners turned to stare, but she was beyond caring. "You've insulted me in the worst possible way. On Valdris, a male who cannot provide for a female is considered worthless. And you're asking me to provide for myself." David rose as well, reaching for her. "Kira, please, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding," she said coldly, stepping away from his outstretched hand. "I see exactly what you think of me." Without another word, she turned and strode from the restaurant, leaving David standing alone beside their table, the untouched bill in his hand and confusion written across his face. As Kira's transport glided through the city streets back to the embassy, tears of humiliation and anger streamed down her face. The evening had started so perfectly. She had felt seen, valued, respected. But it had all been an illusion. David's final gesture revealed what he truly thought of her, that she was worth so little, he wouldn't even pay for her dinner. The bitter irony wasn't lost on her. For the first time in her life, she had found someone who seemed to value her mind and treat her as an equal, only to discover that his respect was merely elaborate cruelty designed to humiliate her in the end. Kira paced the marble floor of her embassy suite like a caged predator, her silk dress swishing with each agitated step. The city lights twinkled beyond her windows, but she saw none of their beauty. Her mind replayed the evening's events over and over, each repetition stoking her anger and confusion. "Your Highness appears distressed," observed Counselor Thane, her elderly advisor who had served the royal family for decades. His weathered face showed concern as he entered her chambers, carrying a steaming cup of calming tea. "Distressed?" Kira whirled to face him, her eyes still blazing. "I've been insulted, humiliated, degraded by that human." Thane set down the tea and settled into a chair, his expression patient. "Perhaps you could explain what transpired?" Kira recounted the evening's events, her voice growing more heated as she described David's shocking suggestion that they split the dinner bill. "Can you imagine? Me, a princess of Valdris, expected to pay for my own meal like some common worker." To her surprise, Thane didn't immediately share her outrage. Instead, he stroked his silver beard thoughtfully. "Princess, have you considered that this David might not have meant to insult you? Not meant to. Kira stared at him in disbelief. How could he possibly mean anything else? Human customs are very different from ours, Thane said gently. I've been studying their culture since we arrived. On Earth, it's common for both males and females to contribute equally to social interactions. They call it going Dutch or splitting the bill. It's not considered an insult, but rather a sign of equality. Equality? The word tasted strange on Kira's tongue. Yes, human females are not expected to be provided for by males. They work, they earn, they pay their own way. And males, they don't define their worth by their ability to provide material goods. Kira sank into a chair, her anger beginning to give way to confusion. But if males don't provide, what is their purpose? Companionship, emotional support, intellectual partnership, love that exists for its own sake, not because of what one can give the other. The concept was so foreign to everything Kira had been taught that she struggled to grasp it. On Valdris, relationships were transactional. Females provided leadership and grace. Males provided service and material support. The idea of love existing without such clear roles was both terrifying and intriguing. You're suggesting, she said slowly, that David wasn't declaring me worthless, but rather treating me as his equal. It's possible, Your Highness. Perhaps he was showing you the highest form of respect his culture recognizes, the respect accorded to an equal partner. Kira closed her eyes, remembering the evening with new perspective. David's behavior throughout the night, the way he'd listened to her opinions, challenged her thoughts, shared his own vulnerabilities. It had all felt different from any interaction she'd had with males before. He hadn't worshipped her or fawned over her. He had simply talked with her. I've made a terrible mistake, she whispered. Meanwhile, across the city, David sat in his apartment staring at his laptop screen but seeing nothing. He'd researched Valdris culture for hours, finally understanding the magnitude of his error. Articles about the matriarchal society, the rigid gender roles, the complex courtship rituals, it all painted a picture of a civilization where male provision was paramount. He'd insulted a princess without even realizing it. The look of hurt and fury in her violet eyes haunted him. She'd seemed so different from what he'd expected of royalty. Intelligent, curious, surprisingly down to earth. He'd felt a connection with her that was both intellectual and emotional, something he'd never experienced before. Idiot, he muttered to himself, running his hands through his hair. He'd treated her like any human woman, not considering that her culture might view his gesture as deeply offensive. But even as he berated himself, a part of him wondered if there might be more to the situation. The woman he'd spent the evening with hadn't seemed like someone who would be content with a life of being provided for and worshipped. She'd asked thoughtful questions about his work, shared her own insights about ancient civilizations, and spoken with surprising honesty about her sometimes lonely existence as a princess. Perhaps she was more complex than her society's rigid roles allowed her to be. Back at the embassy, Kira found herself unable to sleep. She stood at her window looking out at the city where David lived somewhere among the millions of lights. The evening had awakened something in her, a hunger for the kind of respect and partnership she'd never known existed. On Valdris, she was revered but never truly known. Her opinions were accepted without question, but never challenged or built upon. Her beauty was praised, but her intelligence was taken for granted. Males competed for her favor by offering increasingly lavish gifts and services, but none had ever offered her what David had: genuine conversation, intellectual stimulation, the thrill of being seen as a complete person. Thane, she called to her advisor, who was preparing to retire for the night. Yes, Your Highness? Tell me more about human equality. How does it work? Thane settled back into his chair, recognizing that his princess was experiencing something profound. On Earth, males and females are considered fundamentally equal in worth and capability. They share responsibilities, make decisions together, support each other mutually. In relationships, both partners contribute what they can, sometimes emotionally, sometimes financially, sometimes practically. The value isn't in what one provides for the other, but in what they create together. And this is normal, accepted, not just accepted, celebrated. Humans believe that partnerships between equals are stronger and more fulfilling than relationships based on servitude or obligation. Kira absorbed this, feeling her worldview shifting in ways that both frightened and excited her. Everything she'd been taught about relationships, about her role as a female, about what made a male worthy. It was all being turned upside down. "Your Highness," Thane said gently, "may I ask what you're thinking?" Kira was quiet for a long moment. "I'm thinking," she said finally, "that I may have experienced something tonight that I never knew I wanted. David didn't treat me like a goddess, to be worshipped or a prize to be won. He treated me like a person, an equal, and when he suggested splitting the bill, he wasn't insulting me. He was offering me the same respect he would show any woman he cared about. And how does that make you feel?" Kira touched her fingers to the window, her reflection ghost-like, in the glass. "Terrified," she admitted, "and alive in a way I've never been before." She turned from the window, her decision made. Tomorrow she would find David and apologize. More than that, she would try to understand this strange new world where respect wasn't shown through servitude, but through equality. The very idea made her heart race with possibility. For the first time in her life, Princess Kira of Valdris was considering what it might mean to be simply Kira. The morning sun cast long shadows across the university campus as Kira made her way to the archaeology department. She had traded her elaborate royal gowns for a simple but elegant dress that wouldn't draw unwanted attention, though her otherworldly beauty still caused heads to turn as she passed. David's office was tucked away in the basement of the old humanities building, surrounded by boxes of artifacts and reference books. When Kira knocked on the door, she heard the scrape of a chair and footsteps approaching. The door opened, and David's eyes widened in surprise. He looked tired, as if he hadn't slept well, and she noticed the research materials about Valdris culture scattered across his desk. "Kira," he said softly. "I wasn't expecting—" "May I come in?" she asked, noting the formal way he stood aside to let her enter, so different from his easy confidence the night before. "Of course." He gestured to a chair, then sat behind his desk, maintaining a careful distance. "I owe you an apology. I spent the night researching your culture, and I realize how offensive my suggestion must have been. I never meant to insult you." Kira studied his face, seeing genuine remorse and something else. The same attraction she felt, carefully controlled but unmistakably present. "Actually," she said, "I came here to apologize to you." David blinked in surprise. "You did?" "I overreacted. My advisor explained to me that on Earth, splitting a dinner bill is considered normal, even respectful. You were treating me as your equal, weren't you?" "I was," David admitted. "But I should have been more sensitive to your cultural background. I know how important tradition and protocol are to—" "Stop," Kira interrupted gently. She rose from her chair and moved closer to his desk. "David, can I ask you something? When you suggested we split the bill, what were you thinking? What did it mean to you?" David was quiet for a moment, considering his words. "I was thinking that you're one of the most intelligent, interesting women I've ever met. You have your own thoughts, your own insights, your own strength. You don't need me to take care of you. You're capable of taking care of yourself. I wanted to show you that I respected that." The words hit Kira like a revelation. "You respect my capability?" "Of course I do. Kira, you're not just beautiful, though you are breathtakingly beautiful. You're brilliant. You ask questions that challenge everything I thought I knew about ancient civilizations. You see patterns and connections that I miss. Why would I treat you like you're helpless when you're clearly one of the strongest people I've ever met?" Tears gathered in her eyes, but they weren't tears of anger this time. No one had ever spoken to her that way, acknowledging not just her beauty or her royal status, but her strength, her intelligence, her capability as a person. "On Valdris," she said softly, "strength in females is acknowledged but never celebrated like this. We're expected to be wise and gracious, but also to be provided for, protected, sheltered. The idea that I might be capable of caring for myself is revolutionary. David came around the desk, stopping just in front of her. Maybe revolution isn't such a bad thing. Their eyes met, and the attraction that had simmered between them the night before flared to life again. But this time it was built on something deeper than mere physical appeal. It was founded on understanding, respect, and the beginning of genuine intimacy. "I'd like to try again," Kira said. "The dinner, I mean. But this time, I want to understand your world better. Will you show me your city, as equals?" David's smile was radiant. "I'd love to." They spent the day exploring together, and Kira saw the city through new eyes. David took her to a small cafe where they shared coffee and pastries, and when the bill came, Kira surprised them both by reaching for her purse. The simple act of paying for her own coffee felt like a small act of rebellion and freedom. They visited a local market where vendors of all genders worked side by side, laughing and negotiating with easy familiarity. Kira watched in fascination as men and women conducted business as equals, neither dominating nor deferring to the other. "It's so different," she murmured, as they walked through the crowded stalls. On Valdris, markets are run by females, with males serving as carriers and assistants. "I've never seen such collaboration." "Do you like it?" David asked, noting the wonder in her voice. "I think I do," she admitted. "It's chaotic and unpredictable, but there's something beautiful about it too. All these people working together, creating something larger than what any of them could accomplish alone." As the afternoon wore on, they found themselves walking closer together, their conversations becoming more personal and intimate. David told her about his childhood, his passion for archaeology, his dreams of making discoveries that would reshape human understanding of their past. Kira shared stories of growing up in the crystal palaces of Valdris, the weight of royal responsibility, and her secret longings for something beyond the gilded cage of her position. "I've never told anyone that before," she said as they sat on a bench overlooking the river. "The loneliness, the feeling of being trapped in my role. It would be considered ungrateful, even treasonous. But it's how you feel," David said simply. "That makes it valid." The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and crimson. Kira found herself studying David's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way the light caught in his dark hair. When he turned to look at her, she didn't look away. "Kira," he said softly, "I need to ask you something. This, whatever this, is between us. What happens when your diplomatic mission ends, when you return to Valdris?" The question she had been avoiding all day hung between them. Her engagement to a suitable Valdris consort had been arranged years ago, a political alliance that would strengthen her family's power. She was expected to return home, marry, and produce heirs who would continue the royal line. "I don't know," she whispered. "I've never questioned my path before. But being here, being with you, it's shown me possibilities I never imagined." David reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. His touch was gentle but possessive, and she felt her pulse quicken. "I know I have no right to ask this, but I have to know. Do you feel it too? This connection between us?" Instead of answering with words, Kira leaned closer, her free hand coming up to touch his face. Her thumb traced the line of his cheekbone, and she felt him tremble slightly at her touch. "I've never felt anything like this before," she admitted. On Valdris, physical intimacy is different. It's about duty, about producing heirs. I never understood what humans meant when they spoke of desire. And now? David's voice was husky with want. "Now I think I'm beginning to understand." The first kiss was tentative, exploratory. Kira had been kissed before, but always by males, who approached her with reverence and fear, never with passion and equality. David's lips were warm and confident, and when she responded, he deepened the kiss with a hunger that matched her own. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Kira's royal composure had completely crumbled, replaced by a woman awakening to her own desires. "David," she whispered against his lips, "I want to learn more about human intimacy. Will you teach me?" His answer was another kiss, deeper and more passionate than the first. As the stars appeared overhead, Princess Kira of Valdris discovered what it meant to be desired not for her status or her royal bloodline, but for herself, her mind, her spirit, her emerging capacity for love. The revolution had begun, and it was written in the language of touch, desire, and two hearts beating as one under an alien sky. 3 weeks had passed since that first transformative evening, and Kira felt like she was living two completely different lives. During the day, she fulfilled her diplomatic duties, attending meetings and negotiating trade agreements between Earth and Valdris. But in the evenings, she became simply Kira, a woman discovering love for the first time. Her relationship with David had deepened beyond anything she had thought possible. They spent every free moment together, exploring not just the city but each other's hearts and minds. David had shown her museums and libraries, introducing her to human art and literature. In return, she shared the beauty of Valdris culture, the musical mathematics of their architecture, the philosophical poetry that was considered high art on her world. But it was in the quiet moments that their bond truly flourished. Late-night conversations that stretched until dawn, walks through moonlit gardens where they shared their deepest fears and dreams, stolen kisses that grew more passionate with each passing day. Tonight was different, though. Tomorrow, the diplomatic mission would conclude, and Kira was expected to return to Valdris to fulfill her engagement to Prince Valdor, a suitable match chosen by the Council of Mothers. The weight of duty pressed down on her as she stood in David's apartment, watching him prepare dinner for them both, another small act of equality that never failed to move her. "You're quiet tonight," David observed, looking up from the stove where he was stirring a sauce. "More than usual, I mean." Kira managed a small smile. "Just thinking. About tomorrow?" She nodded, unable to trust her voice. They had avoided discussing her departure, both knowing it would only cause pain. But now, with less than 24 hours remaining, the reality could no longer be ignored. David set down the spoon and crossed to where she stood by the window. His hands settled on her shoulders, and she leaned back against his chest, drawing comfort from his warmth. "Kira," he said softly, "I need to tell you something. These past few weeks with you, they've been the happiest of my life. You've changed everything I thought I knew about love, about partnership, about what it means to truly connect with another person." Tears started in her eyes. "David, please don't." "I have to," he interrupted gently. "Because I love you. Not Princess Kira of Valdris, but you. The woman who pays for her own coffee and argues with me about archaeological methodology and kisses me like the world is ending." The words she had been longing to hear were also the ones that broke her heart. "I love you too," she whispered. "That's what makes this so impossible." David turned her in his arms, his hands framing her face. "Does it have to be impossible? Stay with me, Kira. Choose your own path." "You don't understand," she said, her voice breaking. "I have duties, obligations. My people depend on me. The marriage alliance with Prince Valdor will secure trade routes that will benefit billions of Valdris citizens. How can I put my personal happiness above their welfare?" "But what about your happiness? What about your right to choose your own life?" Before she could answer, her communication device chimed with an urgent message. With trembling hands, she read the transmission from Valdris, her face paling as she absorbed its contents. "What is it?" David asked, alarmed by her expression. "Prince Valdor has been involved in a scandal," she said slowly. "He's been caught embezzling funds meant for humanitarian aid to the outer colonies. The engagement has been called off in disgrace." David's eyes widened. That means I'm free," Kira finished, hardly daring to believe it. "The Council of Mothers is requesting that I remain on Earth to continue diplomatic relations indefinitely. They want me to serve as an ambassador." For a moment, They simply stared at each other, processing the miraculous turn of events. Then David swept her into his arms, spinning her around as they both laughed with joy and relief. When he set her down, their eyes met, and the laughter faded into something deeper and more intense. The barriers that had kept them apart were gone. They were free to choose each other, free to explore the love that had been growing between them. "Marry me," David said suddenly, his voice rough with emotion. "I know it's crazy. I know we've only known each other for 3 weeks, but I can't imagine my life without you. Marry me, Kira. Be my partner, my equal, my love." Instead of answering immediately, Kira reached up and began to unfasten the elaborate pins that held her hair in its royal style. The silver-gold mass tumbled around her shoulders, and she felt the last of her princess persona fall away. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes to everything." Their kiss was desperate and passionate, full of relief and joy and desire too long held in check. David's hands tangled in her freed hair, while hers worked at the buttons of his shirt, both of them eager to eliminate any barriers between them. "Are you sure?" David asked against her lips. "Once we cross this line, there's no going back." "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," Kira replied, her violet eyes blazing with determination and love. "I want to be yours, David, completely, as your equal, your partner, your wife." He lifted her in his arms, carrying her to his bedroom as if she weighed nothing. The space was simple compared to her royal chambers. No crystal walls or floating furniture, but it felt more like home than anywhere she had ever been. Their lovemaking was a revelation. On Valdris, physical intimacy was a duty performed in darkness and silence, focused solely on procreation. But with David, it was a celebration of their love, their equality, their mutual desire. He worshipped her body not because she was a princess, but because she was the woman he loved. And she gave herself to him not out of obligation, but out of choice and passion. Afterward, they lay entwined in the starlight streaming through the window, their breathing slowly returning to normal. Kira traced lazy patterns on David's chest, marveling at how right this felt, how complete she was in his arms. "I have a confession," she said softly. "Oh?" David's hand stroked her hair, his touch gentle and possessive. "That first night when you suggested splitting the dinner bill, for just a moment before I got angry, I felt something I'd never experienced before. Excitement. The thrill of being treated as an equal. I think part of me fell in love with you right then, even though I didn't understand what it meant." David chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest. "So I insulted you into falling in love with me? You respected me into falling in love with you," she corrected. "There's a difference." They talked through the night, making plans for their future together. Kira would establish the first Earth-Valdris cultural exchange program, introducing concepts of gender equality to her people, while sharing Valdris wisdom with humanity. David would continue his archaeological work, with Kira as his partner in both research and life. As dawn broke over the city, Kira made her final choice. She recorded a message to the Council of Mothers, formally accepting the ambassadorial position and announcing her engagement to David Chen. She spoke of love, of partnership, of the revolutionary idea that true strength came not from dominance or servitude, but from equality and mutual respect. "Some of you will be shocked by my decision," she said to the recording device, "but I ask you to consider this. What if our greatest strength as a people comes not from maintaining rigid traditions, but from our ability to grow, to learn, to embrace new possibilities? I have found love here on Earth, not the kind of love where one person serves another, but the kind where two equals create something greater together. I hope to show our people that this kind of partnership can make us stronger, not weaker." When the message was sent, Kira felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She was no longer Princess Kira of Valdris, bound by duty and tradition. She was simply Kira, archaeologist, ambassador, and most importantly, a woman in love with her equal. David pulled her close, kissing her forehead tenderly. "Ready for our new adventure?" Kira smiled, thinking of the challenges ahead. The cultural barriers they would work to break down, the two worlds they would help bridge, the love they would nurture and protect. It wouldn't be easy, but nothing worthwhile ever was. "Ready," she said, and sealed the promise with a kiss that tasted of starlight and new beginnings. The alien princess had learned human rules the hard way, but in the end, she had discovered something far more valuable than protocol or tradition. She had found love, true, equal, revolutionary love that would reshape both their worlds one heart at a time.